All right. Wow, that is so loud. You're going to have to watch with this. Once again, welcome. It's been so much fun
talking with everybody, meeting with everybody. Talking through the struggles that we have or the excitements that we have inside those classrooms. It's been fantastic. So really appreciate everybody being here, and I'm glad we had the opportunity to meet again. I think it's so important. I'm always excited on Monday to go back inside the classroom after this meeting. I just wanted to do some note taking just to start off this night. We have I don't know if you probably saw on all the signs that I keep mentioning that the foundation supported us here. The EWC Foundation does a whole bunch of amazing things for our students and for our faculty here on campus. And so what I'd like to do is recognize both Lisa Johnson, the director, and Todd Peterson, the president of the foundation. And if we could give them a round of applause for helping us support this event. I also have some nice and special guests here at this table with us. We do have Dr. Jeffrey Hawes, the president of the college. And VP John Hansen of academics. I don't know about you guys, but one of my favorite things to do is to watch those students learn, grow, and understand math, and actually sometimes even get excited for it. So I just have some other people I have to recognize. I need my they're excited about this, four graduating math majors. I think we got 3 of them this spring and 1 of them next fall to stand up, because I don't think you guys know how hard it is. On a side note, they'll be presenting their final projects next Friday. I will provide anybody with a Zoom link to watch it live if you're interested.
3 math.
It's tomorrow. Okay, you guys ready? I think that answers the question of why we absolutely love math, and why we keep answering that question over and over again. When are we ever going to use it? And that use of that mathematics got me to what I wanted for our keynote tonight. I think our keynote tonight, our speaker tonight, really embodies the connection between mathematics and the real world. I think when he first came to the college, he did the commencement speech for us, and I noticed that, man, he really likes math, and he really connects those things out there. You might know him. He was a partial founder of Ethereum, a cryptocurrency, and part of the company that started Cardano and Midnight. I think I got that right. And I thought I was busy. I have 7 children, right? So I thought I was busy. And then I found out that he helped bring back the dire wolf. And I've seen Game of Thrones and I'm scared. And with all that, he's continuing to start funding mathematics all over the world. He makes plants grow, or at least trying to. And I just want to welcome Charles Hawkinson up here.
Hi, everybody. You hear me in the back? Okay. You always wonder about the acoustics of places like this. Well, thank you so much for having me come and speak. It's always a pleasure. I live down the street. I'm just over in Wheatland, so it's not too much of a drive. I got a bison ranch out there. And actually, we welcomed our newest bison. We have this little week-old red dog named Poppy. Her mom abandoned her, so we've been bottle feeding her. And so I now have a pet bison, in addition to a bunch of bison on the ranch. So I do a lot of things these days. I'm most known for being in the cryptocurrency space, but I had a long and serpentine and circuitous academic journey. You see, when I was born in Hawaii, and my mom and dad decided to homeschool me because in Hawaii the schools aren't so good, and they were just, that's the way they were. So I had the fortune of working through every summer, which allowed me to graduate early. And so I graduated when I was 15, and I started actually at a community college. I started at Front Range Community College, and I was there until I was 18. I graduated, and then I wanted to be a doctor because my dad was a doctor, and my brothers became a doctor, and my grandfather is a doctor, and uncle is a doctor, a lot of doctors. So I said, you know what I'll do is I'll just take a math class or something on the side, and then I'll do the medicine stuff. So I studied that for a while, Metro State, and then I started learning how medicine operates, and I said, this is horrible. It's a bad field, you don't actually cure people, you don't actually fix things. So I said, what I'm going to do is I'll be a mathematician. So I transferred up to CU Boulder, and it was one of those combined programs where you could take graduate classes and undergraduate classes. And I took tons of math. I was a very antisocial person, so I really enjoyed algebraic topology and did a lot of analytic number theory, and I really liked foundations of mathematics. I was a set theory guy and a logician for a little while. Got really involved in things like the continuum hypothesis, and I love paradoxes like Banach-Tarski and these things. And then I started thinking, man, what does it mean to be a mathematician? And I said, oh, okay, well, you go get a PhD. I said, okay, yeah. And then you go do a postdoc, and they pay you nothing. It's like, oh, okay. And then you have to go get tenure, which means you're impoverished for about 10 years, and then you work on a lot of stuff you really don't like. And then as soon as you get tenure, then you work on things you do like, but by then you're too old to actually solve any of those problems. I said, that sounds just great. So I should do something else with my life. So right around the same time, I became a political firebrand because, I lived through the 2008 financial crisis and Occupy Wall Street and other things. So I campaigned for Ron Paul. So I was reading all these old books by dead Swiss people, and I read all the things from Ludwig von Mises, and I became very interested in economics. And I studied Austrian economics, and I absolutely love the idea of deflationary monetary policy and all this other stuff, but you can't really be a central banker. It's even harder than being a mathematician, right? But then suddenly Bitcoin came out of nowhere, and it was this intersection of all the things that I studied. I studied a lot of number theory, which meant I did a little bit of cryptography. And, I'd done a lot of work in all this monetary policy stuff, and that's kind of, and then also writing software. I said, wow, an open source money system. And so me and my 7 friends, we all got very fascinated in it. And back then, Bitcoin was very small. It was under $1. And it grew by leaps and bounds like a weed, and then became a victim of its own success. What ends up happening in these projects is as they get big, people get opinions. And when they get opinions, they start hating the thing. They're like, oh, Bitcoin is blind, deaf, and dumb. It doesn't do anything. We should build up better Bitcoin. So I said, I could do that. And so I started creating cryptocurrencies. My first one was called BitShares. I formed it in 2013. It was the first algorithmic stablecoin and the first DEX. And it didn't work. And then I created Ethereum. And I'd still argue it doesn't work, but it was really successful. It's worth about $250 billion, and 100 million people use it. It's a worldwide project. And after doing this for a while, I said, I'm going to start a company which is at the intersection of several things. So I'm going to start a company where we have one foot in academia, and we built the largest research group in the world for cryptocurrencies, and one foot in engineering, and actually building products. So we have about 168 scientists that work with us, and we've published over 250 papers, and we have over 10,000 citations. And most of those papers are interdisciplinary. They have a little bit of programming language theory and distributed systems design and a lot of math in them, but then also they go into economics. They go into law and policy. We even wrote a constitution, because these on-chain systems, they actually are social systems as much as they are mathematical systems. And what's been cool is that as the use cases of cryptocurrencies have grown, they have started creating this interdisciplinarity of problems we have to solve. You can't get away from medicine, for example, so right now with a partner called Nexifuse, we're building an agentic electronic medical record system. Because it turns out that medical records and blockchains are actually quite close to each other. Blockchains solve a problem that medical records need to solve. Medical records live at the clinic and they live at the hospital, but how do you move them around? And how do you know who has the right to do that? And also, how do you analyze them? How do you extract data from them without revealing the patient's underlying personal information. Because there's huge public health value, there's clinical trials you want to run, and also how do you move around globally? So how does a hospital in Switzerland, when you're skiing there during the winter time and you break your leg, get your medical records from here in Wyoming? It's a super hard problem, actually, because the systems are not interoperable, the authentication is not interoperable. So it turns out it's exactly the same type of problem as building an online voting system or building a digital currency or these types of things. So the value of all the math that I studied was that it gave me good epistemic hygiene. It gave me the ability to think. You know, everything in life, you don't get batteries included with it. You get a blended bag of nonsense. And you have to figure out what's important about this and what isn't important. What should I focus on? How do I know it's true? You know, what could I improve? What do I buy? What do I build? All these different things. Like when you look at cryptocurrencies, they're a smorgasbord of different technologies, which make them so difficult to publish. So in some cases, we don't even know what journal to publish in. So you have, on one hand, incentives engineering. You have tokens. Why would anybody want these tokens? Okay, well, what do you do with the tokens? What are you incentivizing? It's not just a speculative instrument. The entire security of the system is reliant on the token being distributed and valuable and respected. So what creates that? Bitcoin came from nothing. There was no exchanges, no marketplaces. Now it's a $1.5 trillion instrument. There's something that happened along the way. It's actually very fascinating game theory. So we started a lab at Oxford led by Elias Kasoupas at St. Anne's. We've probably written more than 30 papers. And it's actually a field of game theory called algorithmic game theory, mechanism design. So games you normally study and you try to predict the Nash equilibrium. You're like, what's going to happen? Reverse game theory or mechanism design, you say with what you want to happen and you try to build a game to make that thing happen. Go in the other direction. Okay? So if you design a tokenomics the right way, you get what you want, which is decentralization, adoption, high security, value. It's an interesting puzzle. But then that also has to work with a completely unrelated field of study, distributed systems theory. Now distributed systems, this was like one of the first real fun problems of computer science to work on. And pioneers like Leslie Lamport and the others in the 70s, they first started networking computers together, and the problem is computers have a different perspective on order and time. It seems simple, but it's really hard, actually. Because if you're in Canada, you're going to see the event with a slightly different perspective of time than if you're in Japan, or if you're in Argentina. So if you have 3 computers in a network, and their observations are different, you ask them to make an ordered list, they're going to give you a different ordered list. So if you're a truly decentralized system, what's the correct ordering? And how do you pick a winner? You have to build what's called a logical clock. And actually Lamport solved this in 1970, called Lamport clock, and he got the Turing Award for it, which is the Nobel Prize in computer science. Now from that, it led to the creation of distributed systems theory, and all these consensus algorithms came out. And then the problem is the first generation of them, they were about just how do we get computers to talk to each other? And the attack vector was a computer can fail. So your fault was the network would go down. And if you're old enough to remember, back in that day, you'd actually have something look like a phone book. You'd pick it up, you'd flip through it, you'd find the email address of the university or the military installation where that failed. You'd pick up the phone, you'd either send them an email or you'd call them, say, hey, your computer's down. Say, oh, I didn't know, let me go take a look. Because everybody in the entire internet was in one book. It was a very small, exclusive network. What happens if you don't know them? What if the networks are very large? Or what happens if they're actually malicious? Which was inconceivable in 1980, malicious. You telling me Los Alamos is going to lie to us in San Jose? How dare those bastards? But nowadays, it's like obvious. Yes, people are trying to do bad things to you over the internet. At this point, I don't even trust my dog. You know, everybody's out to get you. So how do you build a Byzantine fault-tolerant protocol? How do you build a protocol where somebody's actively trying to harm you? Then all of a sudden, you have to bring in something new. It's called cryptography. They deal with an adversary. They build a security model. They put these things together. So we have economics, we have distributed systems theory, we have cryptography. And when you look at cryptography, this is a rich, beautiful field, and it actually has incredible mathematical connections to it. You're looking for math problems, mathematical fields that have certain capabilities, certain qualities about them. Like this idea of it's really, really hard to compute something unless you have a trap door. So coming from number theory, the canonical thing is integer factorization. So if I give you any number, fundamental theorem of arithmetic says you can decompose it uniquely into prime numbers. Pretty simple. You know, something like 30 is 3 times 5 times 2. Doesn't seem very profound. But it says any number, so 2 to the 128th power plus 1. You can uniquely decompose that. Is it prime? Is it not prime? And if you know the decomposition, you can calculate that quickly. It's multiplication. But if you go in the other direction, it would take more time than all the atoms in the universe to calculate that. Okay, so it's a problem that has a trapdoor. Now you can use this to create a public key and a private key. This was an amazing thing that came out in 1976. It was called RSA, named after Ron Rivas and Andy Chenier and Leonard Alleman. They all won the Turing Award for that as well. And RSA revolutionized communication because the first time ever we could actually talk to each other over a channel without knowing each other secretly. You used to have to share keys with each other. It's called symmetric crypto. Well, what other mathematical structures have these properties? Because that's integer factorization. Well, it turns out discrete logarithms also have these properties. And it turns out you can even do this with lattices and hashes and all kinds of other things. The lattice stuff is actually immune to quantum computers. It's really cool. So there's all this mathematical richness that exists in cryptography. And from that, you're able to construct algorithms, and those algorithms are tuned towards adversaries. But then you have to think, what are the capabilities of the adversary? What types of computers do they have? Do they have access to my device? Do they have some knowledge of my algorithms, or are the algorithms black boxed? So there's all these design principles there. Well, how do they apply in distributed systems where everybody runs the software? You think about a cryptocurrency, there are no secrets. You have the same software I have, and we see the same output. There's nothing hidden there. So the cryptographic side has to go way up. There's tons of interesting things we have to do to actually make that work at scale. And then there's programming language theory. Programming languages, that's the oldest field of computer science because it came from math. There's a wonderful thing, actually. So there was everybody know who David Hilbert is? So David, he was a brilliant, brilliant mathematician. He was part of a larger group of mathematicians in the turn of the 19th and 20th century that were trying to formalize math in a very rigorous way. Because math was very fragmented. If you were an algebraist, you really couldn't read what the analyst did or the topologist did. Topology didn't really even exist very much. And so what did they do? They said, well, we need to rebuild all the axioms of mathematics and build back up from some foundational set, and then we're going to prove some properties of the formal system. We're going to prove completeness and decidability and independence and consistency. These are the basic things that you want to prove in a formal system. And so they wrote these lovely books like Alfred North Whitehead and Bertrand Russell wrote The Principles of Mathematics. It's over 1,000 pages long. And at the very end of the book, if you actually could read the book, it's a hard book to read, they showed that 1 + 1 = 2. How about that? And what they unified was logic and arithmetic, which was actually very revolutionary because once you had that, you could reduce any proof from axiom to well-formed formulas and then calculate up to something. Just magical. So then they said, well, then obviously all of mathematics can just be reduced to a collection of formulas, and then we can create these thinking machines, and then they'll be able to just tell us what's true and what's not true. That was the dream, the program. So they worked on it, worked on it, worked on it, and Hilbert had some amazing original success. Like he created Hilbert's geometry, and he showed that it was a complete and decidable system. And it's a really lovely accomplishment. But then when they started getting to everyday math, first order predicate calculus, they started showing that anything that follows Peano's arithmetic is not complete. There's a lovely guy named Kurt Gödel who showed this. And basically what he proved is that no matter what you do, you can never make math complete. Because no matter how many axioms that you have, things you assume to be true without them being proven true, you can always invent a well-formed formula that requires another axiom to solve. But then the minute you do that, you can invent another one, and inductively, you can never complete math. Which was just horrible because 50 years of work had just been thrown out the window. So then they tried to fix it. In the 1930s and 40s, they said, okay, well, even if math is not complete, can we still build these machines where we can put things in, the machines can tell if it's true or false or undecidable because we lack the axiom. And then there was this lovely graduate student named Alan Turing. And Alan said, oh, I think I can solve that. And so he created the Turing machine, and he actually showed that it's not solvable. See, it's false. You can't build decision engines. But he created Turing completeness, which was the birth of computer science. So programming language theory actually started from the formalization of mathematics, and it works its way through. And at the time, there's actually two other, because everybody's heard of Turing machines, but at the same time, lambda calculus was invented by Alonzo Church, and recursive functions by Gödel, and they're all isomorphic to each other. Means it actually shows the foundations are true. Well, from that, we were able to create programming languages and computers. So these are old fields, and they're magical fields, and they have so much amazing stuff in them. And all this advancement in programming language theory worked its way into the cryptocurrency space. Why? Because we want programmable cryptocurrencies. So how do you attach a programming language to a blockchain that has to be cryptographically secure? Everyone has to have it. It has to have great properties like safety and liveness with it, and it has to be economically compatible. But then you have these theoretical barriers that stand in your way. Namely, if you have no decidability in a system, it's called the halting problem. How do I make sure that somebody can't just run a program infinitely on my system? Because a computer can never know if it's in an infinite loop. So you have to solve that. So you create what's called a quasi-Turing system. So it's metered to use the token to solve it. So the magic of cryptocurrencies is the interdisciplinarity of it and the emergence of them. Every time you have a problem, you look to some field of science or thought, some idea, and you try to put those pieces together in just the right configuration, and then you resolve that problem. And then once you resolve it, you move on to the next level. So our biggest issues right now are privacy and scalability. Huge issues. These systems are transparent and open. They sound great. Massive global networks, auditable, time-stamped, irreversible, immutable. Wow. So that means everything you've ever searched for online can just be put in a blockchain, and everybody everywhere can see it. Your Amazon shopping cart, everybody everywhere can see it. All your purchases, every dollar you've spent, where that $100 withdrawal from the ATM came from, they'll be able to see it. And actually, we need privacy. Well, how the hell do you put privacy in these systems? How do we do it in the non-crypto world? Well, you have a trusted third party. You look trustworthy. You got the beard, the glasses and shit. Nothing could possibly go wrong. So here's all my personal information. So you just go ahead and keep that secret for me, okay? All right, there we go. All right, congratulations. I hope. Notice I didn't give it to the guy with the ducks. Can't trust that guy. He's in a foul mood. Don't worry, I won't send you the bill. I only have like 3 more duck-related puns. We'll see what we do. But anyway, that's bad, because what if he dies? I lose all my private stuff. What if he gets compromised? What if he's not so trustworthy? Okay, well, we don't want to trust him then. So how do you build a trustless private system at scale that's economically efficient, 24/7 availability, and also has great cryptographic assumptions about it? First of all, what does math even look like for that? Turns out the guys at MIT solved it. Sylvia Macaulay and his co-authors back in 1985 also won a Turing Award. You notice there's a pattern here. People tend to win Turing Awards when they solve these things. Never a Fields Medal. So Silvio, good friend of mine, crazy Italian guy, he created something called the zero-knowledge proof. It's one of the coolest and most interesting things in the history of computer science. So basically, you can prove you know something without revealing the thing. So I have the password. How would I prove it? I'd give it to him. He would say, yes, Charles knows the password. Then he'd run off with it and sell it to her. Not good. Instead, you create a proof in a very specialized way by taking the statement, translating it into a mathematical statement that can be reducible down to kind of like a circuit, and then you have some sort of engine that can verify it as a Boolean statement, true or false, and all it answers is, yes, they do know this, or no, they don't. So first off, what statements can even be reduced this way? Is it infinite? Can any statement be reduced to these Boolean zero-knowledge proofs, or is it very specialized? And also, is it interactive or non-interactive? So the original way he developed it, they were interactive zero-knowledge proofs. So you just ask questions and probabilistically you'd get a sense of it. So you have a 50% chance of guessing right. After several trials, you'd say, yeah, statistically speaking, probably no way they could be lying to me. Yeah, they probably know it. But what if you want an actual deterministic thing? It's not probability, it's like absolute knowledge of it. And it can't be interactive because you don't know who to ask, because it's a blockchain and I don't want to reveal the person. So in 2016, we solved this problem. It's called Groth 16, and we came up with a succinct non-interactive arguments of knowledge, NARCs. So we took what Silvio came up with in the 80s and translated that into something that could fit on a blockchain. And then what language? A programming language. Is it a general purpose language? Oh no, God no. Had to be specialized. Then people said, well, that sucks. We want general purpose programs. And so then they updated the concept at the start and allowed full programmability. So we wrote some papers on it called Kachina and others that allow you to do that. But what's cool then is now you can have private programs. You can prove properties of those programs. Anybody in the world can verify what you're saying is true about them, and nobody knows what the underlying data is. Why would we care? Well, let's say you go into a bar, and you say, okay, I'd like a drink. Well, here in Wyoming, they know you. They'd be like, get out, Bill, you're drunk. But if you're in a place where they don't know you, they'd be like, well, you need to prove your age. Well, how do you prove your age? Well, you show them a document. That document has your name, your address, your actual age, all these things. You don't want them to know how old you really are. You want them to lie and say you're 21, damn it. So a zero knowledge proof, all it does is it proves that you're at or over 21. There you go. It's called selective disclosure. Well, you can do that for anything, any statement, any argument of knowledge, any attribute. So we worked with the W3Cs, the standards body that standardizes most of the things on the internet, like HTML and CSS and these other things. And we created standards actually for selective disclosure using zero knowledge proofs for identity. So you can prove you're a US citizen, but not show who you are. You could prove that you live in a certain location, but not the actual location, just you're a resident of Colorado, or your age, or you're a doctor at this hospital, or you're a member of this organization. Think about selective disclosure for whistleblowing. I'm a member of the FBI. Here's this document. You can guess that document. Here you go. There you got it. It's like, no, wow, that's terrible. Great societies require these things, especially global societies. And so these are the problems we work on in the cryptocurrency space. And what's cool is the more we do it, the more modularity and compositionality the systems have. They're a broader class of systems called complex adaptive systems. And initially when people studied these things, they studied the weather. It's a complex adaptive system. And any of these chaotic systems, if you guys may have, some of you may have studied chaos theory or nonlinear dynamics, those types of things, they have simple rules, you put them together, and then emergent properties grow out of the repeated application of the rules. My friend Stephen Wolfram is probably the one you got encountered with this Mathematica, New Kind of Science, Cellular Autonoma, that giant book that everybody claims to have read, but no one actually read. You can see it in Barnes and Nobles. You know, that's complex adaptive systems. Cryptocurrencies are the best case study of them. Simple rules. This is how consensus works. This is how the transaction works. This is how the token works. Very simple, not very complicated. Being applied again and again and again by millions of people who have never met each other across the world asynchronously. And then magically they grow into a 500 million person, multi-trillion-dollar ecosystem that can now solve math problems, that can now keep your identity secure, that can actually run an entire economy or have a voting system for a business. The rules didn't change very much. The combinations of these things didn't change very much. Once we found them, they're there, and they're open source. So you have this other lovely property at the same time called the smart cow effect. So cattle are pretty dumb. But every now and then you have that revolutionary damn cow, and it's smarter than the rest. And you know what it does? It figures out how to open the fence. And when it opens the fence, what happens? All the cattle get out because they follow the smart cow. You see? And so smart cow is a property that we have in computer science where if one person figures out how to do something, everybody else follows that person and now knows how to do that thing. So digital rights management is the canonical example. You make your DVD or your Blu-ray. We have an encryption scheme. And some smart person figures out how to crack it, and then what do? They distribute it, and then everybody can break the encryption scheme, and so as a result, everybody gets free video games or free videos or these types of things, right? So Smart Cow also works in open source software. Solving the Byzantine generals problem, solving decentralized consensus for Bitcoin was about a 30-year quest. There's all these things that had to happen and do, but the minute it was resolved, There's now thousands of consensus protocols that are custom tuned for different applications, and everybody built on top of that. The zero knowledge proof came out in 1985. Very few papers afterwards. It was kind of an anomaly. Verified computation, who would care about this thing? Outside of a weird Italian guy at MIT. But then all of a sudden people made money from this problem. If you solve this, you get private cryptocurrencies, you get all these amazing use cases. This year, we're on target for over 1,000 papers to be published in this thing globally. So we went from one paper by a weird guy at MIT and his friends to 1,000 per year in multiple multi-billion-dollar cryptocurrencies being built with this in the future of the space. So when you put the right incentives, and you have the smart cow effect, when people figure out there's a something there, there's a there, that things tend to grow parabolically. And when you combine that with a complex adaptive system, they grow in very unpredictable ways. Emergence retroactively is explainable, but proactively is very difficult. That's why it's hard to predict recessions and depressions. It's hard to predict black swan events, if you ever read Nassim Taleb's book on this topic. So that's what I do for a living, is I study these types of systems, I build these types of systems, we build it with academics, and we have a heck of a lot of fun. And what ends up happening is you end up being a tourist in lots of different industries. So you have all the time some government official come and say, hey, I need to solve something. I say, what do you need to solve? I say, well, we're doing refugee relief in southern Sudan. I say, okay, what do you need me? Well, I have this problem, we want to pay them, but if we pay them the wrong way, like people go beat them up and steal their money. So we want them to pay it anonymously, and we want them to be paid on their cell phone, and then they can just use it quickly. And, oh, okay, well, it's a cryptocurrency problem. Another person says, hey, we have a voting system, but nobody believes that the voting system is secure. So how do we have it so you can prove that your vote was counted correctly, and you can prove the integrity of the system as a whole? That's a cryptocurrency problem. Or the medical records, or the supply chains, where they say, okay, we want a supply chain where we can prove we're carbon neutral, but Apple doesn't want Samsung to see what they're buying. So we can't publicly disclose anything inside the supply chain. This is a cryptocurrency problem. Or in Ethiopia, where they say, hey, we're starting to finally deed the land. We'd like to put our deeds on a blockchain because if we do it the wrong way, people are just gonna steal each other's land, right? Because they're going from oral traditions to paper to digital. And somewhere in that translation, if you happen to live on a very valuable piece of land, maybe, just maybe, somebody else will bribe the government to take that away from you. So we'd like immutable timestamp records, where we could put all the stuff, all the easements, everything in one place. Here in Wyoming, that'd work real well for water rights, wouldn't it? My Lord, it's tough if you're a rancher. So this is what we do, and math is at the heart of all of it, for three different reasons. One, everything usually reduces down to some sort of mathematical formalism at the end of the day. You have to understand how it works. So right now we're all elliptic curves people. So my friend Neil Koblitz, he's won the war. Congratulations, Neil. And now we're not being elliptic curves people anymore because scary quantum computers are going to come and wreck everything. So now we have to do different types of math. And we're having a big debate. Do we do hashes or do we do lattices? And the elliptic curve people could never go away. So they have these things called supersingular isogenies, but nobody likes those. So we have to be math people. There's these hard problems we have to understand. And we have to understand also performance. So we're not just pure mathematicians, but we're applied mathematicians at the same time. Because we have to measure how these systems work at scale. How do you predict how a protocol is going to behave under an adversarial load with millions, if not billions of users and billions of transactions every day happening? How do you predict that? You have to build models. That's what an applied mathematician does. And you have to build these beautiful, elegant models with rules which somehow match reality, and then they give you the ability to then reason and think about, okay, is this a good protocol or a bad protocol, and what trade-offs am I willing to live with? Then you have to make sure it's secure. So you have to write mathematical proofs about adversarial behavior. You have this concept of provable security. And there's many different ways to do this. Global universal composition is the most common, but there's hundreds of ways to model an adversary. And then you think about what capabilities does the adversary have? Do they have access to the device? Do they have a quantum computer? What level of computation do they have, et cetera, et cetera? And then you have to say, okay, assuming all these things are true, it's provably secure. Yay. Then you have to implement it. And when you implement it, it's not good enough to write code, because everybody's trying to break the system. Every day there's $80 million to $140 million of hacks in the cryptocurrency space. Because we have a bunch of idiot teenagers writing code they can't really understand, calling libraries they don't fully understand, and they're kind of paid up front, and when bad things happen, they run away. The incentives are not aligned for high quality software. That's why we don't have a lot of government adoption or Fortune 500 quite yet. So we have to prove it's secure. Well, we have something called formal methods for this. So you write a mathematical description of the program, and you prove the program has the properties. When it turns out all those languages for formal methods were built by weird academics who had no idea how engineers work, so they don't work at scale for real software projects. They are great for writing papers. Terrible, terrible for actual real engineering. So you have to go and become a programming language expert, upgrade the languages. We did. We took the Haskell programming language, created the Haskell Foundation, became open source developers, got linear types into GHC9. How about that? Yeah, shame on you if you know what that means. So we did this type of stuff. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of mathematics behind it. Because remember those Turing machines? Well, an alternative formalization is lambda calculus, and that grew up and became type theory. And the type theory is how you connect mathematics and computer science together at a very programmatic level. And then you can use that to write all these lovely proofs that your programs work properly. And they can't be hacked. They're correct by construction. We do this, it's called high assurance software development, typically done in the aviation industry, because we like planes that don't fall out of the sky unless you're Boeing. We like trains where the brakes turn on, right? These are things that we enjoy, but the time horizon are typically like 10 years, 20 years, 30 years to write the program. Here we have to write the program in like a week. So how do you do formal methods fast? And how do you prove things when the people writing the proofs aren't mathematicians? So you have to make the languages accessible for these things. So along the way, you also have to found things. Like I set up the Hoskinson Center for Formal Mathematics at Carnegie Mellon University. The reason I created it was that there was no custodian of Lean, which was a programming language that I was using to prove properties of programs. And it just so happens it's super good to also prove mathematical problems. And it's been great to watch the mathematical community take it up. Like Terry Tao actually is using Lean now, which is really endearing to me. He's the Fields medalist, that's exciting. So yeah, we've got to prove properties of program, but that's mathematics. Dependent types, all these other things, just math in a different coat. So, to the young people here, math can get you anywhere, and you don't need a PhD for it, but what you need is good thinking, and you have to always ask, how do I make it practical? Even pure mathematics can be made practical. There's a beautiful book to read. It's a very old book. It was written by G.H. Hardy, in I think the 30s or 40s. It's called The Mathematician's Apology. And he was apologizing and also talking about his history in mathematics, and he said, at least I'm in a field of math that no one can use to kill people. And it turned out we used it to build computers and kill a lot of people with them, but he died before that happened. But the broader point is that mathematics will always find a way to be applied. And the people who do really well in life are the people who figure out a way to take these things and apply it, and you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Every step of the way, we didn't know how to solve any of these things, because no one had done any of these solutions before. Like, it just didn't exist. So we had to write a paper and be wrong. And when you're wrong, you lose money. Like, you get sued, bad things happen, people die, all kinds of things like that. But the greatness comes when you have the courage to keep going, because eventually it gets better. And what really is magical is you look at your career over 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you start noticing that you've actually solved meaningful and significant things. Cryptocurrencies have gone from a triviality that nobody knew anything about to a multi-trillion-dollar industry where the president gets to issue his own coin and screw us with it. It's pretty magical. It's crazy if you think about it, over the arc of just less than 15 years, how quickly things have changed. But really under the hood, the most magical thing is we brought back the academic spirit of interdisciplinarity. The fun part about reading about Leibniz and Gauss and Euler and reading about all these people like Newton isn't that they solved something. Okay, yes, every great academic has solved something. The fun part is reading about what else did they do despite the things that they solved. Like it turned out that Sir Isaac Newton was also a mystic and an alchemist. And he got mercury poisoning from it, went batshit insane, and so they stuck him at the Royal Mint so that he could not be an embarrassment. And Leibniz also had an incredible metaphysics and all these things. But you notice that the history of old academics, they tend to know like 5 or 10 different fields at the same time and actively publish in them and play with them. The greatest tragedy and sin of modern academia is we lost our interdisciplinarity. We just said, you know what? You don't just study armadillos. You study transgender armadillos from Chile in a small town nearby Patagonia. And you're going to write papers on those if anybody comes to you and asks you about an armadillo, you say, I don't know anything about that armadillo. I'm sorry. I'm an expert in this other armadillo. That's academia. And that's why it's developed such a bad reputation, because you've created over-specialization. And the magic of AI and LLMs is it's knocking us out of this miasma, this hypnosis, because no matter how good you are, within 5 years, the AI will be more of a specialist than you are. Because it can read every paper all at once. And to prove this point, I did an experiment. I read this lovely book on the historical Jesus from James Tabor, who's an academic out in North Carolina, called The Jesus Dynasty. And I said, oh, well, it's been a long time since I read the Bible. What I should do is use LLMs and create a meta-Bible. Let's see how quickly I can do this exercise. So there's 66 books in the Bible, and Old Testament, New Testament, all written over about 1,000 years by many different authors, many different people, many different historical contexts. Sometimes written in a comfortable place in Jerusalem, other times written on the road, on the back of a camel. So I used a bunch of LLMs, and over a weekend I created 1 million words of a meta-Bible, a book for each book, and it contained detailed maps, a glossary of terms, the language that it came from, was it Hebrew or Aramaic or Coptic Greek or Koine Greek or whatever the language was, scholarly interpretation, specific key verses to focus on all these various things. 1 million words is like the size of Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, that other big volume of books that everybody talks about, never read, right? Over a weekend. And probably half of it's true, which is better than most scholarly works. So what's the lesson about that? Is that no matter how much of a specialist you are, within 5 to 10 years, these things will be more of a specialist. So what does it mean? The reward will not come from specialization. The reward is going to come from generalists. That's what Leibniz was. That's what Gauss was, if you really think about it. They did everything. They were experts in astronomy, and they thought about biology, and it was the problem of the week. Somebody would come to them and say, that's the smart guy. That's the smart gal. Let's just go ask them the question. They'll figure it out. And that's what academia is supposed to be, to me. And the cryptocurrency space, to me, was the only place I could have joined where I got to do a little bit of everything. I didn't become a doctor, but now I own a healthcare clinic in Gillette, Wyoming, with 20,000 patients, and we have 40 providers. It's an amazing place, and I run it with my dad and brother who are doctors, and I get to think about medicine problems. We're doing stem cell research, and we're doing all kinds of crazy stuff. We just passed the Stem Cell Freedom Act. Leo helped us with that. It was great. So that's my Tuesday. And then on the Wednesday, I get to do synthetic biology, and a friend of mine brought back the dire wolf. That's just a terrible idea. But we did it anyway, because life finds a way. And so that was fun. Just got done. And then on Thursday, we do all this cryptography stuff, and we have these scary quantum computers, and we got to work with the US government, wrote some of their standards with NIST, FIPS 203, 204, 205, and figure out, how do you make these things secure at scale so they can be used with military and intelligence agencies, and if they're using them, it probably works, so we can use them for our customers, mutual benefit. Then on Friday, we have to do money stuff, because somebody has to pay the bills, go figure. And it's interdisciplinarity, and that's generalization, You get to be a specialist for a day, then you go on, you get to be a specialist another day, and go on. So as academics, my advice to you is learn AI and learn how to allow it to let you think and do things you're uncomfortable with. The death of your career is when you get too good at one thing. You can never be good at everything, but try to at least understand different things. A friend of mine, Voevodsky, was another mathematician, was a brilliant algebraic geometer, got a Fields Medal, and he was just top of his field, along there with Grothe and Deak and these other people. He decided one day on a lark to get into my field and do stuff with formal languages and formal methods. And he was really interested in unifying a bunch of different fields of math together and create kind of a new foundation of math called homotopy type theory. But he had no idea how any of this stuff works. He's not a type theorist, he knows a lot about homotopy theory. And so he just started writing things down, and he's emailing people, and the professors who got the emails are like, we don't know what to make of this because this guy's a Fields medalist, but he clearly has no idea what he's talking about. How do I politely respond? Maybe his email got hacked, I don't know. But he had the comfort to step out of Voevodsky, the Field medalist. That's the king of mathematics. You've won, congratulations, go out to stud. To Voevodsky, the undergrad. Okay? How many of you would be willing to do that with the careers you've had, the experiences you've had, go to the other side? But that's where the greatness comes, because in the process of doing it, you take things back with you that you never thought you'd know, and it makes what you do better. And that's what I've found in the cryptocurrency space, being in here for the past 10 years. I've resurrected a lot of academics. One that works for me is Phil Wadler, a good friend of Mars. And Phil actually was around during the internet's creation. He was at Stanford with Vint Cerf and Bob Kahn. They gave him the ignoble task of testing whether the link between Stanford and San Jose was working. He's this nice, precocious undergrad. He's like, okay, I know exactly how to do that. So he created the first online computer game. He built this little Pong-style game, and he said, hey, it's working. So obviously the network is working, yay. Instead of becoming a game developer, he became a world-famous programming language theorist. He's now a member of the Royal Society. He created the Haskell programming language, amongst many other things. But some of the most endearing work that he's done throughout his incredible career, 25,000 citations and hundreds of papers, has been the work he's done with us in the cryptocurrency space. Because he had to learn things that he was deeply uncomfortable with. And he went from being the expert to the student. And that's what we must do if we want to succeed. So it's been a hell of a life. It's been a lot of fun. And I always try to save a little bit of time for questions and answers for everybody who took the time to listen to me. But cryptocurrency space, despite what you've read, is actually worth the effort, just not the way you think. If you look at it as a financial product, it's not. It's an aggregation of a bunch of people around the world that want to build new systems, new voting systems, new money systems, new financial systems, and the root of it is to restore trust amongst the people who don't trust each other. And every time it touches something, it reminds you why things work the way that they work. Why does academia work the way it works? Having labs at Tokyo Institute of Technology and University of Edinburgh, down in South America, University of Buenos Aires, University of Wyoming, Stanford, they're all different academic systems. So they're not compatible at the surface, but the core, the curiosity, the desire to invent all these things are. So finding that compatibility gives you a new way of thinking about academia. The same for cryptocurrencies. To debate them and say Bitcoin's not real money, you have to start asking, what is real money? What are the properties of it? Means of exchange, unit of account, store of value, what the fuck does that mean? What makes good money? Is the US dollar good money? Well, it's better than the shilling, the Kenyan shilling. Maybe. I don't know. What makes good money? It's hard to say. So in the process of debate, it creates good epistemic hygiene in that you get to ground truth and you get more certainty of what you actually believe and what you don't believe. You see? And this is what the cryptocurrency space is doing. It's forcing everybody at every level, every time it touches something, to contend with what is good, what is wrong, what's real, what's not real, what is truth and trust, these types of things. And it's touching academia in its own way. It's killing the cryptography industry. No one's finishing their PhDs. They're dropping out and starting cryptocurrency companies. They're like, we're very hated at Stanford. I was developing that student for 4 years. He had this promising career. Oh, come on. He's great. He's not publishing anymore. And so I'd highly encourage you, interdisciplinarity. And when you look at these things, ask, well, what's all the fuss about? And then when you really dig back into it, math is at the core. And what's at the core of math is curiosity, a desire to understand that which cannot be understood, and a desire to see how far your mind will take you. So thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching my rant. And if you have any questions at all, stick around for a few minutes to take Q&A. Cheers. Who wants to be a mic person? Luke, you want to do that?
You only mentioned quantum once. Where do we go from here?
Okay, so epistemic hygiene is a phrase I use a lot. The first thing you do, whenever there's this magic MacGuffin, you always ask, is it real or not real? Is it going to happen or not happen? Because there's a debate, and it's fair debate. So who has the biggest incentive to care? The U.S. government. Why? Because we have weapons and classified information, and we want to keep our secrets. We love our secrets. So encryption gets destroyed by quantum computers, by something called Shor's algorithm, amongst others. There's Grover's algorithm and a few others in quantum information theory. So DARPA has a program called QBI, the Quantum Benchmarking Initiative. And what they did is they brought all these genius physicists together and engineers together, and they created an initiative to benchmark every one of the major quantum computing companies. And they have 3 gate conditions, and if they pass through all 3 conditions, they will have a quantum computer by 2033 that is able to do meaningful things. So far 11 companies have passed the first gate condition, and there's probably a greater than 50% chance that we're going to have a quantum computer. So how do quantum computers work, and why are they a problem? So succinctly, imagine you have this giant library, okay? And this person wants to give you their phone number, but they're kind of mean to you. So what do? They write their number inside one of the books, and they just put it at random in this library. And they're like, if you can find my number, you can call me. It's easier than dating a 20-year-old. So how would you solve this problem? Well, if you're like a normal computer, what would you do? You would start at a bookshelf, because it's random, there's no algorithm you can apply. You just pull a book, you open it up, you flip through every page, and then you repeat the process. Now, if you parallel computing, you bring your 5 friends, your 5 cores, and they go and do that. Now you're searching 6 books at a time. If it's a big library, you will never find the number. That's why cryptography is secure. But what quantum computers do is very clever. They have this process where they can pull all the books off the shelf. And what they can do through a process of entanglement and interference is they can kind of create a local minima or maxima, depending on the algorithm they're using, around where the number's at. So they'll put all the books back on the shelf, but the books around where the number is will be slightly pulled out. So it doesn't help you compute faster. What it does is it gives you the location, the rough area to look to solve. So you get a sneak peek of where to go. This is why classical computing and quantum computing work so well together. So for cryptography, like the factorization of integers, it can give you some idea of, roughly speaking, the domains of what numbers to look for, and then you can search around those, and then voila, you found the factorization. And every time you find a magic number, you massively reduce the size of the number, right? Every time you find a prime, it gets smaller and smaller. So that's why you can reduce things that normally run in nonlinear time to linear time, or better with a quantum system. Okay, so given that magic, how do you actually do it? And there's many different approaches. Photonic quantum computers that use light to do this compute. Big problem there is memory, which is why they have time crystals. Trapped ion, nitrogen vacancy, topological quantum computers use Majorana fermions to do it. There's many, many different things you can do. The consensus is that one of these guys is right, and it's not the raw compute power, it's the error correction. Because every time you do something, as you scale the qubits up, the probability of the wave collapsing in an inconvenient way goes up. Okay? So the problem is we're getting really good at error correction. If you look at Google Willow, it's about 1,000 times better than its predecessor 2 years ago. So when you have that rate of improvement, you can chart the line, and somewhere between 2031 to 2033, we'll have enough logical qubits to actually do real things. On the chemistry side, predict how bombs are going to work with lots of electrons, which tells you how to make things. It's called MatterNet. On the cryptography side, to factor integers or to defeat the discrete logarithm problem. Optimization problems, like traveling salesman problem, very classical problem in computer optimization you can't do. You can actually solve that with a quantum computer. So there's a lot of these things that are very scary. Now for crypto, we don't care, because we already have algorithms that are resistant or immune to that particular problem-solving method. The modulo SIS assumption with lattices is one example. The other is the stuff we do with hashes. Finding a pre-image of a hash, it only goes down by a factor of 2. So 256 bits is well more than enough security. Great. Okay. So if we already have methods to defeat quantum computers, why haven't we adopted them in the cryptocurrency space? This is where the engineering reality comes in. All of those methods are 10 to 100 times less efficient. So you have a tragedy of the commons. No one wants to be the first mover to solve a problem. It's like a company saying, why don't you put solar and be environmental and everything? Well, if my competitors don't do it, I will be 10 times as expensive as them. I will go out of business and be the most honest, nicest out of business company, and my polluting bad companies, they will stay in business. So if I put a signature scheme in that's post-quantum, it's 10 times slower, 10 times larger. So who wants to say, hey, I've just upgraded the network, and instead of 100 transactions a second, it does 10 transactions a second, it does 1 transaction a second. You don't make any money this way. So you either have to have a gun to your head, a consortium, or you have to improve the efficiency. That was one reason. The other reason is we were waiting for NIST to get off their ass, and we, the industry, had helped them along to standardize the crypto, because they control the hardware. Once they standardize, Intel and AMD and ARM and NVIDIA and these other guys will build specialized hardware to accelerate it. If you use a non-standard curve or a non-standard technique, you don't get hardware acceleration, you're just software, so you're 100 times slower. So that's why it sucks to be not AES, or sucks to be not SHA-256, or these types of things, right? So NIST is standardized, we have good algorithms, they're provably secure, and we know how to build them. They're now in high assurance libraries, so we can use them at any time. And now it's just a matter of getting them to work exactly the way we want to, and then they'll just sit on the sidelines, and when we're ready to go, then we can add them in, and we're protected from quantum computers at the signature level. There's still some unsolved problems, like post-quantum VRFs, and also what impact will quantum computers have on consensus. We wrote a lovely paper out of Princeton in 2019, which modeled the Bitcoin network and the level of resistance it has with quantum computers, and in that paper we define a quantum adversary. So that model is kind of a standardized model that you can apply for different parts of the system. So there's a lot of moving pieces to it, but in general they're great because they're going to do a lot for us, especially in drug discovery, new battery development, a lot of great military applications. In fact, that's how they found a pilot. They had a quantum fingerprint for his heart, and they were able to use the quantum effect to find him. So it's magic, but it's problematic because it breaks things. It's our Y2K bug. And when we're ready to go to fix it, we'll fix it and take the hit. Next question.
Hoping that answered it.
Got a lot to work with there. Oh, ridiculous.
So Charles, you were here a year ago and you had talked about research you were conducting with bioluminescent plants. And can you talk about the process and share with this group how you used AI to move through the entire research process in a very timely manner?
Well, I have to be careful because we haven't quite revealed publicly the project, so I can only speak in generalities and not specifics. But in general, if you read George Church's book, Regenesis, or if you look into synthetic biology in general, basically what we're doing for both animals and plants, we're the industry as a whole, we're using techniques like CRISPR to modify the genome. And the goal with the modifications is that we would like to either make these modifications to adapt the organism better for the environment it's in, or to emphasize a desirable characteristic of the organism as a whole. So you can make a tomato that grows in a drought that's twice as big as a normal tomato. You can change how photosynthesis works. Most photosynthesis is C3, but there's these very specialized ones that are C4 photosynthetics. And they produce like 10 times as much sugar, like sugar cane, for example. So could you take that photosynthesis pathway and put it into a slow-growing tree? And if you do, they grow much faster, as an example. So when you look at synthetic biology, bioluminescence or autoluminescence is just one characteristic, and it's very studied because typically it's cross-linked. Because it's expensive to sequence something, so if you put bioluminescence into a gene, it's cross-linked with another gene. If it's glowing, it means it got the gene that you wanted. So you can just see it. See, I don't need to sequence it, it took the gene. So for decades and decades, people had known this. And so we're very curious about how far that can go. But more broadly, we've been considering how do we build plants in a way that they're better for the environment as a whole. So there's many use cases, lead sequestration, Chernobyl. If you go into the reactor, there's this mold that's on the reactor that actually absorbs radiation. Everything dies, but somehow this mold survives, so you can use it for bioremediation of radioactive materials. You can make plants that are incredibly drought resistant. In Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, they're proposing building this giant tree wall to stop the growth of the Sahara Desert, because every year it continues to grow. That's a use case where you can say, could you reclaim deserts and actually create jungles or other things from that area? Because deserts and jungles are somehow twins of each other, go figure. So this is what we focus on, and how we're using AI is there's a ton of computational biology. Because when you're creating a living organism, there's a latency in that living organism. Like very public knowledge, Colossal wants to bring back a woolly mammoth. All right, we have the DNA of the woolly mammoth. We have the DNA of the elephant. We know how to do this. Here's the problem. It takes 22 months of pregnancy before the baby comes out. So you think you got it right, and then you get your answer 2 years later. Wouldn't that be great for your students? Hey, I took the exam, what's my grade? I'll let you know when you graduate. What? But that's a bad test. So you'd like to do a lot of work before you start the implantation to eliminate the chance of failure, because you only get the answer 2 years later, whether you succeeded or failed. AI really helps you with that, because in 3 different dimensions. One dimension is reduction of the search space. If you have 10,000 things you can do, maybe you want to reduce that to 100 good things you can do. So instead of doing 10,000 experiments, you do 100 experiments. Second, of the 100, ordering. What is the most likely to succeed? So prioritization. And third, insight into things that would probably nudge you along. Things not to do, things to do with that. So when you do computational biology, it really helps you narrow that to a much smaller set of experiments. And when you do them, you tend to have many more successes as a result. And so instead of a drug costing $100 million to develop and 10 years to develop it, you can get that drug figured out at the lab in maybe 2 years and for $5 million. And you can eliminate thousands of false starts. You say, well, this particular thing, well, it will solve the problem, also will create teratomas and create tons of tumors and kill you, all this problem. We see this a lot in stem cell science. Induced pluripotent stem cells can cure diabetes. Chinese did it. They cured type 1 diabetes with iPSC. They also can turn your body into a giant tumor because they live forever and they can multiply and be very problematic. So how do you know you're going to get the diabetes cure instead of the super tumor? Computational biology and AI. It helps you organize your thinking in these types of things. And so you have less failures, more successes with finite resources. So you can do more with less. The meta property is also good communication. Knowing how to talk to people, super important in collaboration. In the cryptocurrency space, it took us a while to figure out how to talk to people. When I first started talking to cryptographers, they didn't like us. The crypto people are bad people. I was at Crypto at Santa Barbara. It's a very famous conference. Beautiful, beautiful place. And I saw Whitlock Diffie, another one of those Turing Award winners. And he was standing there drinking his wine. And I come up and I say, and we had this lovely conversation. And then he asked me, so what do you do? You know, where do you teach? I said, oh, I don't teach. I'm in the cryptocurrency space. He just grabbed his wine and walked off. I was like, who does that? Well, that's just what Diffie does. But they accept me now. I know that because they ask me for money. It's true in academia. That's equivalent to marriage. But it took us about 10 years to figure out how to talk to them, right, and interact with them. AI helps you know the rules. How should the email be formatted? What do they care about? If you're engaging with another academic, do you really have time to read the 230 papers about his armadillos in Chile? Do you? Do you want to read those papers? But you know what? AI can read those papers for you. And they can pull out 4 or 5 interesting things and all this other stuff. And then they can help you sculpt this masterpiece of an email. And the person will read it and say, finally, there's a person who understands me. You'll have a very awkward armadillo conversation. But once you get past that, you'll actually have a collaboration, right? It'll just work. It's magical. So that's the meta property of AI in science that I think is vastly underappreciated, because we like over-commoditizing things. And you know, we keep writing these emails like, oh, sir, and madam, and it's AI generated, and it's just slop. That's not what it's for. What it's for is you don't have the time to understand that person. So use AI to help you understand that person quickly, and then you can really get to the core of whether they're actually interested in the thing that you're interested in, and they actually can contribute to that thing in a meaningful way. You see? So those 3 different dimensions of space reductions, ordering, and an enhancement, massive gains. We've probably done 10 years worth of research in 3 years, and we've really pushed the state of the art, because we have to for the things we want to do. But then just also knowing how to talk to collaborators, especially when they don't speak your language. It turns out synthetic biology, China loves it. So they are dumping massive amounts of money into it. And the problem in China is English competency is sometimes not where it needs to be. So you're communicating through Google Translate, basically, and that makes it very difficult. So that localization is good because they also publish a lot in their own language. So you may not be aware that they solved the problem you're trying to solve 3 years ago, but it never ended up in an American journal, so you didn't even know it existed. We saw this a lot, actually, in the 20th century with mathematics in Russia. The Russian mathematicians refused to write their papers in English. They wrote them in Russian, Russian pride, and they would publish them only in Russian journals. So Kolmogorov and all these other famous Russian mathematicians, they solved problems we were trying to solve in France and in Germany and the United States, 50, 60 years ago. And it turned out to have been solved 10 years ago by some Soviet guy. And then the Americans would say, we did this, we solved this thing. And the Russians get just pissed off. They're like, not only did I solve this, I wrote a book about it, you bastard. Like, you wrote it in Russian. We don't speak your language. Silly Russians. And so the ability to translate and understand what they've written, if they haven't translated English, is another humongous advantage I think is vastly underappreciated. And this doesn't have to be for hardcore academics. It could be for the trades as well. Actually, more so here than I would say in hardcore academia. Because, the Russians are the world's foremost experts in welding titanium and tungsten. They're just so good at that, because they make their submarines out of titanium. And they do a ton of tungsten fabrication. How many people here in America do that really well? Not a lot. And the people who do have it is trade secrets. They don't talk about it because it belongs to some company somewhere. And if you're a trade school and you're saying, well, we want to have an edge on other people, maybe we can use these technologies to find people abroad who have mastered some things that we could bring in, and it gives us a huge advantage. Another example is rammed earth construction. China built the Great Wall of China this way. They just enslaved 40 million people, give or take, and they sent them for centuries up to the northern border of China, and they literally pounded earth in a very special way to create the Great Wall. And it's been around for 2,000 plus years, go figure. So it's a pretty good construction technique. It's very labor intensive. It turns out you can do this still, and very few people do rammed earth construction. There's a weird guy up in Canada that can teach you, but you have to live on his farm for 5 days. And there's a few people in Europe and other things like that. But, where you don't have a lot of concrete and you don't have a lot of raw materials, but you have a labor surplus, that could be a very valuable thing if you want to build infrastructure. So exotic construction, there you go. You can use AI to translate these things written in other languages in other time, then convert them and rediscover them, or collaborate with people. So it works in the blue collar, it works in the white collar, and I think this is the single most unvalued thing, because we keep looking at AI as an adversarial concern. Its existence is to replace you. We don't look at it as an empathy engine of saying, this gives me the time, my most scarce resource, to actually understand what matters to you, translate it and find common ground with what matters to me. And the minute we found that common ground and we're speaking the same language, we're friends for life. And in academia, you typically only get to do that a few dozen times. And the older you get, the less you get it, and then you get it through your graduate network. So if you don't have graduate students, you're fucked. And so this is a good way to restore and replicate that. The other thing that AI is really good is devil's advocate. We're so good at convincing, especially if you're smart, that you're the first person to do it, or your idea is the best idea in the world. And so what we always do is we construct a digital twin, and its only job is to tell us where we're wrong. So again and again and again it says, that's stupid, and here's why it's going to fail. And you just want to kill your computer, you really do. Sometimes it's unfair. But in the harsh criticism, it actually really helps, because you'll find something, and then you emotionally really want to beat the AI. So it encourages you to do better. And that's where the greatness comes. This is why the Star Wars movies were awesome when we were kids, and they were terrible, when they came out in the 2000s. Why? Because George Lucas had no money. And so every idea, he couldn't do it. He had to find a better idea with less resources. Han Solo was supposed to be some weird-ass alien with a mask, and they didn't have any budget for that. So they hired Harrison Ford. Why did they hire Harrison Ford? Because he was a set carpenter. He was doing all the carpentry work. And they're like, would you like to be Han Solo? He's like, all right, I guess, whatever. You gotta give me pot, right? Yeah, of course. As much as you can smoke. And he's Han Solo, and yay, he's a scoundrel. He's got the heart of gold. We love him. Everything's great. If he had unlimited money back then, Han Solo would be a weird alien that has PlayStation 2 graphics. He had unlimited money when he made Star Wars. Again, and also nobody could say no, because he's George Lucas. How can you say no? He owns the IP, has all the money, he's putting up all the money, he's doing the thing. He do whatever he wants to do. So it's super important in any decision system is the checks and balances and the refinements. And great organizations die when success creates a culture of permissiveness, where things just go and nobody can say no and nobody can check and balance it. Typically, when you start, you have resources as the ultimate no. You just simply can't afford to do it the proper way, so you have to find a way that's 10 times cheaper or 1,000 times cheaper. You don't have that benefit when you're big. So AI can fill that gap, and it can come in and be the devil's advocate. So if you're writing a paper at your small scale, I'm doing research or whatever, create an AI agent whose only job is to act as a referee. So before you even send it to journal, before you even go to the conference, you've already been through several rounds of refereeing with that. And you'll find that you have a substantially stronger product. And the thing is, that has unlimited time, right? It's just working for you. And it doesn't steal your ideas. And it doesn't, and its criticism is legitimate and objective. It's not because of a professional rivalry and they have a competing paper and they're trying to kill you so their paper can get out. It legitimately is trying to make your work product better. So I say that's the best meta property above the empathetic communication and us understanding each other is you to understand yourself and to create a regulating function for yourself so you can do things the right way.
Is that? Well, let's give Charles another hand. Just thank you so much. Thanks everybody for being here today. We're gonna reminder that tomorrow morning we start at 9 and we have a pretty cool opportunity to see a company called Rosetta STEM that's going to kind of take mathematics, the handwriting that we put in the inside of our math, and get it on the paper so that we can get it to our students. But other than that, have a wonderful night, everybody.